Have you ever thought that a single awkward moment could change the course of fate? A spilled glass of wine, a cold stare, a seemingly ironic offer could become the starting point of a story that stirs your heart? Kayla, a young waitress from a small town, only hoping for a stable job in a competitive city, and Andrew Jensen, the cold, composed CEO of a prestigious hotel empire, living in a world so luxurious and pristine it feels suffocating. They were never meant to cross paths, until that fateful night at a lavish birthday party, when a small accident pulled them into the same story. But this isn't just a romance between a billionaire and a poor girl. This is a journey of healing, of hidden wounds, of confining prejudices, and of two souls that seemingly had nothing in common. Follow this story from beginning to end, because somewhere in each moment, you might just see a part of yourself in them. It was a Saturday afternoon in mid-June, when the soft, slanted rays of the sun pierced through the tall glass windows of the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans. Classical music gently played in the background, adding grace to the elegant wedding reception that was gradually filling up. Under the glittering crystal chandeliers, every detail was flawless. From the pure white flowers accented with sprigs of lavender to the neatly folded napkins shaped like cranes. At the same time, in the back section of the hall, 24-year-old Daniel, a slender but quick-footed server, was nervously adjusting the champagne tray in his hands. Beads of sweat gathered on the back of his neck, despite the air conditioning running at full blast. This wasn't just another event. Today's wedding was for the mayor's daughter and the heir of the Benson Corporation, an occasion that drew more than 300 guests, including powerful politicians and business elites. Daniel knew one small mistake could cost him this job, a temporary gig, but the only thing he had left after the collapse of his business back in his hometown in Georgia. At exactly 5:17 p.m., it happened. A guest, caught up in dancing, carelessly stepped backward and startled Daniel. His hand shifted slightly, and a glass of red wine tumbled, spreading quickly across the pristine white wedding dress of none other than the bride herself, the only daughter of Vincent Benson. The entire hall fell silent. The music stopped. All eyes turned to Daniel. The air thickened in those few seconds. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. His hands trembled. He tried to apologize, but the words caught in his throat. Vincent, tall, silver-haired, and known for his icy demeanor in financial interviews, slowly stepped forward. He said nothing at first. He simply stopped and looked Daniel over from head to toe. Then he spoke, slowly and clearly. "You no longer work here. Leave the hotel immediately." Daniel swallowed hard, head down. Just moments ago, he was part of the service team, and now, just another unemployed man in this expensive city. And then, something no one expected happened. Just as Daniel was about to bow his head and walk away in shame, a female voice rang out, soft, but enough to make the entire room shift. "Wait, Dad." Everyone turned. At the staircase leading into the ballroom stood a young woman, brown wavy hair gently resting on her shoulders, her face radiating intelligence and composure. She wore a crisp white suit, not a formal gown like most of the female guests, and her sharp eyes fixed on Daniel, not with anger, not with disdain, but as if she saw something deeper than just a red wine stain on a wedding dress. She was Rachel Benson, the bride's older sister, 33 years old, CEO of the largest healthcare network on the East Coast, and often referred to by the press as the Iron Queen of healthcare. "I think," Rachel continued, descending the stairs, her voice calm and firm, "we shouldn't judge a person for a single moment of failure." The room buzzed with whispers. The bride, now being helped to the side, looked on in shock at her sister. Vincent Benson turned, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You're defending a server who just ruined your sister's wedding?" Rachel stopped in front of Daniel. She glanced briefly at the slightly crooked name tag on his chest. A second later, she turned to her father and said, slowly, "No, I'm choosing to see a man who feels fear, who takes responsibility. And instead of throwing him out onto the street, right now, why don't we give him a chance to make it right?" Daniel looked up for the first time. His eyes were red, his face still dazed. He didn't understand what was happening, but in that moment, Rachel didn't look at him like someone who had made a mistake. She looked at him like someone standing on the edge, just waiting for a hand to pull him back. Vincent Benson, a man who believed in results and reputation above all, stared at his daughter for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slightly, voice still cold. "Your call. But if he messes up again, You take responsibility." Rachel turned to Daniel, her tone gentle but firm. "What's your name?" "Daniel, ma'am." "All right, Daniel. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I want you at my company's office. The address is on this card." She pulled a business card from her purse and handed it to him. "Consider this your second chance." Daniel could hardly believe his ears. He held the business card with both hands, as if it were something more precious than a ticket out of misfortune. And so, under the bewildered gaze of hundreds of guests, a server who had just been fired was given a chance by none other than the eldest daughter of the Benson family. A chance no one could have seen coming. The next morning, at exactly 7:45, Daniel stood in front of the Benson Care headquarters, a towering glass building in the heart of the city, sleek, modern, and so unfamiliar that the worn heels of his shoes seemed hesitant to even step across the threshold. He looked up, swallowed hard. Inside, the hallways were vast, the marble floors gleaming, and people moved briskly in perfectly pressed suits, speaking in low, confident tones. Daniel, in a faded but neatly ironed shirt, stood straight, yet his eyes betrayed a quiet confusion, like a sad melody echoing through the grand lobby of a frozen opera. "Do you have an appointment?" The receptionist's voice rang out, not harsh, but far from friendly. Daniel nodded and pulled out the card from the day before. She gave it a glance, made a call through the intercom. Moments later, the elevator doors slid open. "Floor 22. The CEO is expecting you." Rachel Benson's office sat on the top floor. No receptionist. No assistant waiting by the door. Just sunlight pouring through massive glass windows and the steady hum of the air conditioning. Daniel hadn't been standing there for 10 seconds when Rachel appeared. Today, she wore a black button-up shirt, her hair neatly tied back. No heavy makeup, no overpowering perfume, yet her presence seemed to still the entire room. "You're on time," Rachel said, her tone even. "Good." She pointed to the chair across from her. "Sit. I'm not offering coffee." Daniel sat, his posture still stiff like a soldier at attention. Rachel didn't look him in the eyes immediately. She opened a file folder, flipped through a few pages, then finally looked up. "I had your background checked. State University graduate, degree in psychology, experience in community counseling. So why are you pouring wine at my sister's wedding?" Daniel swallowed. A simple question, yet it stung his throat like broken glass. "Because I've lost too much," he said quietly. "My mother died of depression, and no one caught it in time. I quit the profession after that. Stopped believing I was good enough to help anyone." A pause. Rachel said nothing. She closed the folder, and for the first time, a trace of softness flickered in her eyes. "We're running a pilot program at a community mental health center. It doesn't have a lead yet. If you're interested, you can start there." Daniel stared at her, stunned. I'm not sure I deserve that." Rachel leaned on her elbows, eyes fixed on him. "I don't need someone perfect. I need someone who understands what makes people hurt and who has the courage to stay when others walk away." He didn't speak. Her words weren't loud, but they stirred something in him, something he hadn't heard from himself in a long time. "You'll have a 1-week trial," Rachel added, standing up. "If you quit halfway, then I'm sorry. We won't be meeting again." Daniel rose to his feet and nodded. Not out of fear, but because he understood. She was putting her trust in him for the first time in what felt like forever. Someone saw more than just his failures. As he left the building, Daniel stepped out into the street with a feeling he couldn't quite name. Anxiety, confusion, or maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope. But he knew one thing for certain. People like him didn't get second chances often. And this time, he wouldn't let it slip away. About 3 weeks after that fateful birthday party, Amelia walked into the small restaurant where she worked with heavier steps than usual. The midday light spilled through the large windows, making the wooden floor glow like it had been brushed with honey, but her mood was far from sweet. Ever since she last saw Ryan, or more precisely, since the last time he looked at her with that judgmental stare, she had felt like she was living between two worlds. One was her harsh reality, and the other was a memory of a vulnerable moment that had long passed. At the time, she thought simply disappearing from his sight would be enough. But no Ryan came back. Not only did he return to the restaurant, but he came with a proposal that left Amelia frozen in place. "I want you to be my grandfather's personal chef for 1 month at my family estate." She laughed not because it was funny, but because she was too stunned. The man who once made her feel small and inadequate was now handing her an opportunity that sounded almost absurd. His expression was different. Too gone was the cold arrogance of someone used to controlling everything. What she saw instead was quiet, like a man trying to make things right without knowing where to begin. Amelia was ready to say no. She opened her mouth to reject him, but then an image of her grandfather flashed through her mind. He had passed away from heart failure shortly after her grandmother died. Family meant everything to her, something Ryan, no matter how wealthy, could never buy. The silence stretched out like a lifetime. Finally, she said, "1 month, no more." Ryan nodded. But what she didn't know was that this agreement would open a door not just to a place that would force her to face old wounds, but to a path where her heart might once again go off course. On a windless Saturday afternoon, a dark-colored car rolled slowly past the wrought iron gates of the Worthington estate, a place Amelia once believed she would never set foot in. The mansion was surrounded by towering cypress trees and immaculately trimmed flower beds, where even the petals seemed to obey strict order. Every stone in the pathway whispered a reminder she did not belong here. Amelia gripped her handbag tightly, palms damp with sweat. Beside her, Ryan remained as composed as ever. His face revealed nothing, but she could feel the tension stretched taut between them, like a thread pulled tight between past and present. "My grandfather's waiting," Ryan said, tilting his head toward the garden behind the house. "He doesn't know much about you, but he believes in the food." Amelia nodded without saying a word. She followed him, each step feeling like she was crossing into a different world, where her worn apron and beat-up kitchen shoes seemed to disappear into the polished gloss of luxury and control. When the glass doors to the garden opened, the scent of lavender mingled with the warm evening air. Ryan's grandfather sat in a wooden chair, eyes bright and calm. He looked at Amelia and smiled a warm, surprising smile. "You're the one who made that chocolate soufflé, aren't you?" he asked, voice raspy but full of energy. Amelia nodded, slightly flustered. "Yes, I'm Amelia." "Then you're the right one," he chuckled. "I've never seen Ryan this quiet over dessert for 10 whole minutes." Amelia glanced at Ryan, catching his eyes just as he looked away. That evening, she began preparing her first meal in the largest kitchen she had ever worked in. Every tool gleamed. Everything was in place, as if she were stepping into a stage set for a flawless performance. But beneath the surface, Amelia felt an undercurrent of tension. She was cooking not just to satisfy a powerful man, but to honor a promise she'd made to herself. 1 month. 1 month to earn her money. 1 month to survive in a world that wasn't hers. And 1 month to keep her heart from straying again. But as she placed the steaming bowl of soup in front of Mr. Worthington, she didn't yet know that the one thing that would truly change after those 30 days wouldn't be the job. It would be her. From that evening on, every day at the Worthington estate passed like a quiet reel of film. Amelia began to adapt to the new rhythm, waking early, walking through long, empty hallways, cooking in a kitchen that looked more like a showroom, and cleaning up as if no one had ever been there. Mr. Worthington, or Mr. Charles, as she privately called him, turned out to be far more pleasant than she expected. Though occasionally stubborn about his preferences, he always treated her with a patience that even his grandson rarely showed. At every meal, he shared stories about his late wife, who loved orchids, about wartime memories, about how he launched his first hotel from the back of a converted truck. But what confused Amelia more than anything was Ryan. Ever since he brought her here, he had practically disappeared. Every now and then, she'd hear his voice echoing from his office, short, sharp, full of commands. At mealtimes, he always sat across from her, eating silently, his eyes occasionally glancing over just in time for her to look away. On Thursday afternoon, the rain started to fall. Amelia was chopping onions when the power went out. The kitchen dimmed, lit only by the gray light from the large window. She fumbled, trying to open it when suddenly, Ryan's voice came from behind, low and calm. "No need. The generator will kick in a few minutes." Amelia froze. She turned, trying to stay composed. "I thought you were busy all day. Not too busy to forget someone else is in this house," Ryan replied. It sounded halfway between concern and a quiet reminder that he was still paying attention to her, even if he never said so outright. In the softened darkness, with the rain pattering outside, they stood facing each other. No longer just a chef and a homeowner. No longer the clumsy girl who spilled wine, and the man who once looked down on her. Just two people, each carrying an untold story. Ryan broke the silence. "Why did you agree to come here?" Amelia hesitated, her hand unconsciously tightening around the towel on the counter. "Because I owed your grandfather a good meal. And I needed the money." A short laugh slipped from Ryan, not mocking, but like a burden being let go. "I thought that too," he said. "But I'm starting to doubt it." Outside, the rain continued steady, like the long exhale of time. In that moment, Amelia realized this month wouldn't go by the way she expected. It wouldn't be simple. It wouldn't be forgettable. And it couldn't be unfelt. After that memorable afternoon with Mr. Charles and the old memoirs, Amelia spent the evening thinking about Ryan's story, a boy raised in a prestigious family, but never a happy one. She hadn't expected that behind his cold, commanding exterior was a childhood starved of affection, pushed to grow up too fast to uphold a legacy built by someone else. The next morning, before the sky had fully lightened, Amelia passed the reading room. Through the slightly ajar door, she saw Ryan seated in an armchair, a thick book in hand, but his eyes were fixed on the empty air in front of him. The coffee on the table had gone cold. His laptop still displayed a document, but he clearly hadn't read a word. A moment of hesitation. Then she gently knocked on the doorframe. Ryan startled and turned. "You're up early." "For coffee," she replied, half joking. "You, though not for coffee, I guess." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at her for a long moment, then spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "Do you ever feel like you're living a life you never chose?" The question caught Amelia off guard. She gave a small nod. "I think everyone has, at some point." Ryan let out a quiet laugh, but it wasn't a happy one. "I used to think control was the only way to survive, but then you showed up, and everything I used to believe in started falling off course." Amelia didn't know how to respond. Her heart beat faster, not from flirtation, but from the truth in his words. Because for the first time, she heard Ryan admit to his own vulnerability, something no one in his world of business would ever expect. After a pause, she said gently, "Maybe. Going off course a little is how we find the right direction." Ryan looked at her, unblinking. For the first time, there was no distance between them, no titles, no wealth, no background. Just two people, standing amidst the broken pieces, learning to believe that change wasn't an ending, it was a chance to begin again. A few days after that quiet but heartfelt conversation, something had shifted between Amelia and Ryan. No more clipped commands. No more cold footsteps passing like strangers in a house too large. Instead, they began to share small moments, like the first time Ryan quietly laughed when he saw Amelia struggling with the espresso machine, or when Amelia gently adjusted his tie before a video meeting. But the biggest change came on what seemed like just another ordinary afternoon. Amelia was in the study, reorganizing the schedule, when Ryan walked in. He wore a simple shirt and held a small wooden box, lightly covered in dust. "Come with me," he said, offering no explanation. Amelia hesitated, then followed him down a long hallway to a western wing of the estate, somewhere she had never been before. The room was small, warm, and bathed in soft afternoon light. The walls were lined with hand-painted pictures of oceans, meadows, and the portrait of a young woman with gentle eyes. Ryan set the box on the table and opened the lid. Inside were old sheet music, yellowing papers, and a worn pocket watch, scratched and faded. "This was my mother's room," he said quietly. "She used to play piano here every night. When she passed away, I locked it. No one has been inside since." Amelia looked around, silent. She could feel it. This was the only place in the entire mansion where time had stopped. Ryan's voice dropped lower. "I used to blame her for loving someone so cruel. I thought she was weak for not leaving. But now, I realize she just didn't want me to grow up in a broken home." He turned to Amelia, his eyes open, unguarded for the first time. "You remind me of her. Not your appearance, but your calmness, your strength, and your kindness. I haven't seen that in a long time." Amelia bit her lip, her heart tightening. She never imagined she'd be the only one to step into this room to touch the most sacred corner of Ryan's memory. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me this." Ryan didn't reply, just gave a small nod, but something in his eyes had changed. As if, by opening this old room, he'd also unlocked a door inside his own heart. That afternoon ended in a silence that wasn't heavy, but gentle, like early morning mist on the shoulders of someone finally waking from a long dream. From that moment in his mother's memorial room, Amelia realized the walls around Ryan, though high and cold, could still crack if someone waited patiently outside long enough. A few days later, as Amelia was preparing documents for an important investor meeting, Ryan walked in. He looked tired, his suit jacket slung over one arm, his hair slightly tousled, as if he'd just come from a mental battle. But instead of giving orders or asking questions, he simply stood there for a moment, watching her. "Have you ever wanted to give it all up?" he asked quietly, "and just go back to a simple life?" Amelia looked up, a bit surprised. "Of course, but every time I think about letting go, something holds me back. A promise, a person, or just the feeling that something's not finished yet." Ryan nodded slightly, as if hearing his own thoughts in her answer. "They want me to sell my entire stake, restructure the company. Faster, cleaner, soulless," he said, his gaze drifting. Amelia looked at him, understanding the conflict tearing at him between duty and identity, between the world's expectations and his own quiet longing. "You don't have to do anything just to protect an image," she said softly. "Do what's right, not what's easy." Ryan gave a faint smile. "You always say things that make me rethink everything, because I don't want to see you just surviving," Amelia said, slowly. "I want to see you living." He looked at her, longer than usual, and for the first time, instead of masking it, he let something show a trace of fatigue, a small crack in his polished exterior. "When are you free?" he asked, his voice low. "After 6, she replied, tilting her head. "Then at 7. I want you to come with me somewhere." "Where?" He smiled faintly, but didn't answer right away. "Somewhere I've never been able to return to. Alone." Amelia didn't ask further, but inside her, something unfamiliar was beginning to grow. Not curiosity, something closer to trust. And with that, she realized this was no longer a job. This was a journey taking both of them to a place neither had expected, a place where they'd confront themselves and slowly find each other. That evening, exactly at 7 p.m., Amelia waited outside the hotel entrance. She wasn't sure how to dress for a trip to a place he'd never dared return to, but eventually chose a simple, elegant earth-tone dress with a light beige coat. The early winter breeze had begun to chill, but she didn't feel cold, maybe, because her heart was beating a little faster than usual. The car pulled up right on time. Ryan stepped out from the driver's seat, no chauffeur, no convoy. He wore a pale gray turtleneck beneath a black trench coat. His hair wasn't as neatly combed as usual. Tonight, he looked more human and closer, somehow. "Thank you for coming," he said, opening the door for her. "I'm not thanking you yet." "I don't know where we're going," Amelia replied with a soft smile. He gave a quiet chuckle. "Don't worry. I'm not dragging you up a mountain or into a 2-hour finance lecture." The car turned off the main roads and into narrower streets, dimmer, quieter. Amelia noticed they were heading toward the outskirts, not the lavish suburbs, but an older neighborhood, filled with wooden houses and rooftops, weathered by time. About 20 minutes later, the car stopped in front of a small house with a low white fence, its paint peeling, but still well kept. In front stood a tall maple tree, its red leaves glowing under the soft light from the porch. Ryan turned off the engine and sat still for a moment before speaking. "This is where I grew up." Amelia said nothing. She knew he needed that silence. "My mother used to sit right there on that step every morning," Ryan said, nodding toward the porch, his voice tinged with warmth. "She'd drink coffee and read the newspaper. And I'd sneak out back and climb trees just to avoid doing homework." A small smile curled at the corner of his lips, but then his gaze dimmed. "After she passed, I never came back here. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to hold myself together." Amelia gently placed her hand on his, saying nothing. Just that touch, light and steady, was enough for him to know she was there, real, without judgment. "Do you want to go in?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. Inside, the house still carried the scent of old wood, laced with a faint hint of mint, like time hadn't dared touch the memories that lived here. On the table was the same faded blue tablecloth. On the shelves, old books, a few black and white photos, and a framed picture of a smiling woman, his mother, unmistakably. Ryan stood in front of the photo, in silence for a long time, then suddenly turned to Amelia. "You're the first person I've brought here." She spoke gently. "Why?" "Because I needed someone to see me. Not the CEO, not the heir, just Ryan, the kid who used to laugh, who was once terrified of losing everything, and who now is learning how to trust someone else. His voice cracked near the end. Amelia didn't answer. She stepped forward, placed her hand on the photo frame, then turned to him with soft eyes. "You're not alone, Ryan. Not anymore." And as they sat at the old wooden table, under the warm yellow glow of a single lamp, time seemed to slow. Two people, two worlds, two kinds of loneliness, no longer quite so far apart. The next day, the atmosphere at Ryan's office had subtly shifted. Gone was the usual tension. The frantic clatter of typing from the CEO's suite was absent. Even the receptionist, who typically flinched whenever Ryan passed, looked surprised when he gave a small nod instead of just walking past. Ryan sat at his desk, pen in hand but not writing. Beside a thick folder of documents was a small cream-colored envelope, an invitation to Alex's wedding, his best friend from college, a friendship once nearly lost because of his own distance. He picked it up, eyes lingering on the venue, Villa Garden Restaurant, 6 p.m. Saturday, a wedding, a place full of laughter, lights, and genuine embraces. Ryan frowned. He hated weddings, not because he didn't believe in happiness, but because he once believed it was meant for other people. People born with hearts that knew how to love and how to hold on. He checked the time. Amelia would be finishing work soon. Somewhere along the way, his days had started being measured by hers. That afternoon, as Amelia tidied up her files, Ryan walked into her office. He didn't knock, but this time, there was no reminder, no meeting request. "Are you busy tomorrow night?" he asked, hands in his pockets, eyes on the window. Amelia looked up, slightly caught off guard. "Depends on the reason." He gave a slight smile. "I have a bit of an unusual invitation, a wedding." Amelia leaned on her desk, tilting her head. "You're asking me to go to a wedding with you?" "No, I'm requesting social support," he said slowly, carefully choosing the words. She laughed softly, fondly. "You need someone next to you, so people don't keep asking why the CEO of Whitmore always shows up alone." Ryan didn't deny it, but then he added, voice lower, "And maybe I need someone to remind me I still belong in this world." For the first time, his invitation wasn't out of duty or image. It was simply the desire to have her beside him. Amelia looked at him. She didn't answer right away, but then, with a quiet smile, she nodded. "I'll come." Saturday brought a light rain. Droplets slid down the windows of the car, taking them to Villa Garden. Ryan was silent the whole ride, though his eyes occasionally flicked toward Amelia, as if to confirm she was really there, beside him. When they entered the reception hall, all eyes turned to them. Ryan polished and poised as ever, but tonight, his expression held something softer, something closer, and Amelia, in an elegant emerald green dress, walked calmly at his side, unaffected by the murmurs of curious guests. As the music lowered and the bride and groom took the stage, Ryan leaned toward Amelia and whispered, "Can you believe I once thought I'd never walk into a place like this, unless it was to negotiate a sponsorship?" Amelia looked at him. "And now?" He paused, then said, "Now I think some things are worth changing for." The lights dimmed. A slow melody played. Couples began to drift onto the dance floor. Ryan hesitated for a moment, then held out his hand. "Can you teach me? I'm terrible at this." Amelia smiled and placed her hand in his. "I'm not great either, but I think we can learn together." And under the shimmer of lights, among laughter and soft music, they touched not just through their hands, but through presence, through the quiet act of accepting each other. In a moment, wordless, but full of feeling. It wasn't a perfect love story, but it was the prelude to something blooming slowly, sincerely, and no longer afraid. The next morning, winter sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains in Amelia's small apartment, casting soft lines on the wooden floor. She woke not because of time, but because her heart felt lighter, calmer, after the night before. Ryan had walked her to her door, opened the car, and waited until she was safely inside before leaving. No kiss, no promises, just one long look warm enough to keep her heart glowing through the night. Amelia brewed coffee, leaned against the window, and watched the quiet street below. Her mind still wandered to Ryan's awkward smile when asking her to dance, and his faint blush when an old friend teased him for finally bringing someone outside the business world. It wasn't the cold, polished Ryan from the office. It was a man, trying to learn how to soften. She took a sip of coffee, smiling softly to herself. But then her phone rang, cutting through the stillness. An unfamiliar number. Amelia Brooks? A polite male voice asked. Yes, speaking. Good morning, Miss Brooks. I'm the assistant to Mr. Frederick Carrington, chairman of Silverline Group. Mr. Carrington heard about you following the hotel launch event and would like to invite you to lunch to discuss a potential partnership opportunity. Amelia frowned slightly. Silverline was one of the largest real estate corporations' direct competition with Whitmore Enterprises. Perhaps he's mistaken me for someone else, she replied calmly. No, ma'am. He was very clear. The girl who made Ryan Whitmore laugh at the wedding. That afternoon, in an upscale French restaurant in Manhattan, Amelia sat across from a man in his early 60s, imposing in stature, but with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Frederick Carrington didn't waste time. You've done something no one in this industry has managed to do, got Ryan Whitmore to step out of his shell. Amelia met his gaze, her expression unreadable. I don't think I have that kind of power. Carrington chuckled lightly. Not power, influence. And that's often worth more. He moved quickly into numbers, a job offer with benefits nearly impossible to refuse. I want you on Silverline's strategic team. Join me on a new project in California. Ryan is brilliant, no doubt. But brilliance doesn't always recognize potential in others the way I do in you. Amelia was quiet for a few long breaths. She wasn't surprised by the offer. What made her chest tighten was what he said next. Opportunities like this come once, Miss Brooks. And Ryan won't hold you back, especially if deep down, he's always thought you'd leave. That evening, Amelia stood outside Ryan's apartment. No call, no meeting scheduled. He opened the door, surprised. He looked like he had just returned from the gym gray t-shirt, damp hair, breath still catching from the workout. Is something wrong? He asked. Amelia looked at him, eyes serious and steady. Today I got a job offer from Frederick Carrington. Big project, triple the salary. Ryan froze. He didn't ask questions, he just looked at her. And that silence, more than any attempt to stop her, was what hurt the most. You're not going to say anything? She asked softly. He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. I don't want to be the one who keeps you from going further, but what if I want to stay? Her voice cracked slightly. He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. Then stay. Not for me, but because you want to. Amelia looked up, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Say one thing, just one sentence that makes me believe I matter to you. He raised his hand, gently brushing away her tears with his thumb. His voice was low, slow, and trembled, like the first chill of winter. You're the first person who's ever made me wish I hadn't wasted all the years before you. And for the first time, Amelia let herself fall into his chest, letting the emotions flood free. Because finally, after all the doubts, distance, and unspoken fears, she had heard what her heart had been waiting for. On a slow Sunday afternoon, as New York City glowed with soft golden sunlight, Amelia sat alone in her favorite corner cafe. She was writing, not work emails, not reports, but in her old journal, something she had forgotten since stepping into the rush of adult life. I used to think strong relationships began with perfection. Now I know they begin in the cracks where someone chooses to stay and mend it together. She paused, looked out the window. A yellow cab passed by like any other day, but this time, someone familiar stepped out. Ryan, wearing a white shirt, carrying a simple bouquet. Not roses, not rare orchids, just wild daisies, the kind Amelia once said she loved because they never try to stand out, but always show up at the right time. He entered the cafe. Their eyes met through the glass, and the world seemed to go silent. Ryan approached, placed the bouquet on the table. I just met with the board, the California expansion project. I passed it on to Alex. Amelia froze. But that was your project, your vision. Ryan nodded, sitting across from her. Yes, but not what I need most right now. She looked at him, torn between awe and concern. You don't have to give up everything for me. He smiled faintly. I'm not giving it up. I'm choosing differently. There are things we think are important, until we realize no one waits for us forever. Amelia turned her face away, wiping away the tear that caught her off guard. Ryan continued, his voice thoughtful, as if weighing each word. Amelia, you make me want to begin again, not with a job, not with a title, but with life. A life where I don't measure everything in metrics and margins. Then, from his coat pocket, he took out a small navy blue ring box, trimmed in soft velvet. Amelia stilled, eyes wide. No need to answer now. he said. I know we're not the perfect couple, but if one day you want something steady, something lasting, just remember, I'm still here. She didn't open the box. She simply placed her hand over his. Ryan, if I say yes, it won't be because of what you gave up. It'll be because after everything, you've learned to love not with power, but with your heart. He said nothing, just held her hand a little tighter. At that moment, a waiter arrived with 2 coffees and a slice of apple pie, neither of which had been ordered. Amelia laughed softly. Did you bribe the staff here too? Ryan shrugged, eyes sparkling. I'm an investor in this chain. What did you think? They wouldn't listen to me. She exhaled gently, smiling. Then if I say yes, we'll start from the apple pie? Ryan nodded. From the apple pie. And the things we never planned. A week later, the weather turned crisp. Manhattan wrapped itself in a silver-gray coat of autumn. Gentle wind rustled the golden leaves along Central Park. Ryan and Amelia walked side by side along a stone path, the sound of leaves underfoot blending with the laughter of kids biking past. No more distance. No more tension between 2 people from different worlds. They had learned to exist side by side in silence and in imperfect, honest conversation. You know, Amelia said, her eyes following a little dog chasing a leaf. I'm still scared sometimes. Like if I let my guard down for a second, everything we have could vanish. Ryan gently tightened his grip on her hand. You're not alone anymore. I'm here not to reassure you with words, but to prove it, every single day. They stopped at a bench. In front of them, a small lake reflected the moody autumn sky. Amelia pulled from her coat pocket an old envelope, its edges worn with time. This is a letter my mom left, she said softly, before she passed. Ryan took it carefully, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at her, waiting. Don't read it yet, she whispered, her voice blending into the wind. I just want you to keep it, as my way of testing whether someone can be patient enough to stay. Ryan gently tucked the letter into the pocket, over his heart, close to where it mattered most. He didn't need to read it to know. It was a piece of Amelia, and she was entrusting him with something priceless. The wind picked up. Amelia pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, her gaze distant. Ryan looked at her, the woman who had quietly endured so much in a world too big, too cruel. She didn't need saving, but she deserved every ounce of gentleness the world could offer. Amelia, he said, not slowly this time, but with conviction. I used to think controlling everything was the only way to protect what mattered. But now I understand. Some things can only be held on to if you're willing to let go. Let go of what? Ego, the past, defenses, and fear. She said nothing. Then after a long pause, she turned to him, eyes glassy but with a faint smile. I never promised I'd be easy. Ryan smiled too, gently brushing away a strand of hair the wind had blown across her cheek. I don't need easy. I just need you. Just then, a strong gust blew through, whipping Amelia's scarf into the air. They both instinctively stood up, chasing after it. The scarf didn't fall but snagged high on a nearby branch. They looked up, then at each other, and burst into laughter. In the chill of an autumn afternoon, under the dim light of a city that had grown too used to loneliness, they chose to stay. Not because everything was safe, but because, for the first time, they dared to believe. No detailed plan, no binding contract, just a quiet promise that this time, neither of them would have to face the silence alone. That morning, the building housing the headquarters of Ryan's Community Foundation was already bustling early. Staff were preparing for the first major event Amelia had proposed, and that she and Ryan had organized together, a forum called Second Chances, dedicated to those who had failed, lost, but were still trying to stand back up. Amelia was no longer the quiet receptionist behind the desk. Today, she was the opening speaker, not because of fame, but because of real experience she carried within her. As she stepped onto the small makeshift stage in the lobby, the spotlight lit her calm face, though her eyes still revealed a hint of nerves. In the front row, Ryan sat watching her, his gaze steady, unwavering. Good morning, Amelia began, not loud, but clear. I used to think I had nothing to say, that my past needed to be hidden. But then I realized sometimes what we think is our weakness is exactly what helps others find their strength. She paused, scanning the crowd. A few quiet nods met her eyes. I failed. I've been in debt, lost direction, and truly believed no one cared enough to ask if I was okay. Until one day, someone didn't ask about my mistakes. He asked what I needed to stand up again. Ryan lowered his head slightly, blinking away the emotion. And that changed me. Not because he had power or money, but because he saw me. Really saw me. Not as a walking failure. The room was silent. Then Amelia smiled, her voice softening. If you're here today thinking you're not good enough, not clean enough, not worthy enough to start again, I just want to say you're wrong. Everyone deserves a chance to return, including you. Applause broke out, at first scattered, then spreading across the room. Ryan watched Amelia not just with love, but with awe. She wasn't just the woman he loved, she was the woman he admired. As she stepped down from the stage, he was waiting. Surrounded by the curious stares of guests, Ryan didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around her, gently but firmly. "You are amazing," he whispered. "I just told the truth," she replied, resting her head against his shoulder. "And I know, I couldn't have said any of it if not for you. We're building this together, Amelia." She lifted her head, her eyes brighter than all the lights in the room. Not just a foundation, a life. Outside the glass walls, the morning sky was no longer gray. A narrow beam of sunlight had broken through the tall buildings, shining right where they stood. They didn't need grand strategies or prestigious titles. Just someone beside them who believed, who loved, and who stayed. They had found each other in a world too fast, too cold, too full of judgment. 3 weeks after the Second Chances Forum, Ryan and Amelia sat together in a small cafe by the lake. Things finally seemed to be falling into place. Ryan's organization had secured new funding. Amelia had started leading a mentorship program for women who, like her, had once hit bottom. For the first time in years, life seemed right. But peace, sometimes, is only the silence before a storm. That afternoon, while reviewing emails in his office, Ryan opened a link his assistant had sent. The headline, "Young CEO Caught in Scandal with Bankrupt Woman with Civil Record." The screen filled with a photo of him hand in hand with Amelia, leaving the forum. Below were twisted headlines, anonymous sources, and snide remarks hinting that Ryan had let personal affairs interfere with his business integrity. Ryan froze. He didn't care about his reputation. It had always been a shield, not a purpose. But Amelia, she didn't deserve this. At that very moment, across town at the community center, Amelia was speaking to a young woman when a call from an unknown number came in. "Amelia Moore? What do you think about the accusations that you've exploited a relationship for personal gain?" The reporter asked, tone sharp, laced with mockery. Amelia stood frozen. She hung up, but the phone kept vibrating. Another message flashed on screen. "The past isn't that easy to erase, Amelia. People like you don't get to play angel forever." She rushed into the restroom, hands trembling, not because she feared the public, but because she feared dragging Ryan down with her. Suddenly, the familiar feeling returned, the one from years ago, of being dismissed, evicted, rejected by banks, judged with pity and contempt. When Ryan arrived at the center that afternoon, Amelia was still in her office, sitting quietly, her eyes lost in the distance. "I know," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes couldn't hide the simmering anger. "I can't let you carry this," she said quietly. "They won't stop. They'll dig into everything." "Let them," Ryan replied instantly, stepping closer. "We don't live to please the public. You used to live for what others thought of you. What do you live for now?" Amelia lowered her head, eyes burning. "For myself. And for you." Ryan squeezed her hand tightly. "Then don't back down. Not now. Not when you're changing lives, dozens of them, with your story." A long silence stretched between them. Then Amelia looked up and slowly nodded. "Then we fight together." That evening, Ryan posted a message on the organization's homepage. No evasion, no vague clarifications. He told the story, his and Amelia's, with raw honesty and quiet resolve. She failed once, but no one should be defined forever by their worst moment. "She didn't come to me for money. I love her for a courage I haven't found in anyone else." The post spread faster than anyone expected, and strangely, in a world often cold, warm hearts began to speak up. People who had faced judgment and loss, people like Amelia, began sharing their own stories. And it was the truth, simple and direct, that proved stronger than any lie. That night, sitting together on the small balcony of Amelia's apartment, Ryan asked, "If you could go back, would you have walked away from all of this? Avoided it from the beginning?" Amelia smiled, set down her cup of tea, and leaned her head on his shoulder. "No," she whispered, "because if I had walked away, I wouldn't have found you. I wouldn't have found myself." They sat there, while the city buzzed with chatter and gossip, but for them, everything had gone still. Because when truth and love stand on the same side, no storm of public opinion can shake the ground beneath them. One early autumn afternoon, as the sunset stretched across the glass walls of the Rosewood Hotel lobby where Kayla now served as general manager, she stood quietly by the window, watching the busy street below. The gold-trimmed clock on the wall struck 5:30. Kayla had been here nearly a year, ever since the night that changed everything: a spilled coffee, a cold stare, and a man named Andrew. But today, the hotel wasn't just welcoming a VIP guest. It was welcoming back a memory she had once tried to forget. The internal phone rang, breaking the silence. The receptionist's voice came through, tentative. "Miss Kayla, Mr. Andrew Miller is at the front desk. He's asked to see you, immediately, if possible." Kayla's hand tightened slightly around the ceramic cup she was holding. Her heart skipped a beat, then sped up. She had prepared herself for the day he might return, just not like this. No call, no warning. After a moment of stillness, she set the cup down, took a deep breath, straightened the tie of her uniform blouse, and walked toward the elevator. Her steps were steady, but inside, a storm of nerves, anger, and something softer began to rise. When the elevator doors opened, she saw him standing there, taller than before, slightly weathered, but his eyes, still the same, deep, unreadable, and this time, a little unsure. He stood up, adjusted his collar, and smiled gently. "Still remember me?" Kayla stood facing him, silent. Her eyes gave everything away. It's hard to forget the person who made you cry, and even harder to forget the one who first made you want to stay. Andrew faltered. The space between them quieted. Then he spoke, his voice low. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I came to say I was wrong. I thought I could go back to my old life after you left. But every time I opened my laptop, every morning I walked into the office, something was missing. No, someone was missing. You." Kayla bit her lip. Her eyes welled. "You think coming back here and saying a few words is enough?" Andrew didn't flinch. He pulled out a sheet of paper, not a work contract, but a business proposal. This time, it was an investment plan into a new hotel chain founded by Kayla with her as the official CEO. He would be a minority investor. "I didn't come to fix things with words. I came with action. And if you can't forgive me, then at least let me stand behind you, the way you once believed in me when no one else did." Kayla took the paper, hands trembling slightly. But in her heart, something softened. She looked at him, not as the man who had hurt her, but as someone genuinely trying to make things right. She folded the document and tucked it into her jacket pocket. "So, do you have the patience to wait? Because I'm not someone who trusts easily. Not anymore." Andrew smiled, his voice gentle. "I'll wait a lifetime if it's for you." The air stilled. Outside the windows, the fading light bathed the city in gold. And inside the lobby, an apology was offered, not in tears or blame, but in quiet hope, rekindled. Weeks passed after that encounter. Something began to shift quietly, without fanfare. Just a few good morning messages. A perfectly timed coffee left outside an office door. Conversations at dusk on the hotel rooftop, overlooking the Washington, D.C. skyline. And on one of those nights in October, when the wind played through Kayla's hair, Andrew appeared not with documents, not with a meeting, but with a light jacket and a small velvet box. Kayla turned when she heard his footsteps. Her eyes caught the soft glow of the balcony light. "I knew you'd do this someday," she said, "but I didn't think it'd be today." Andrew paused, looking at her for a long time. Then he smiled, not the confident smile of a CEO, but the quiet smile of a man who was risking his heart. "I used to think I didn't know how to love, that my life only needed data, power, and a 5-year plan. Until you spilled that coffee, and the rest of my life spilled with it." Kayla laughed, but the tears had already begun to fall. She gripped her hands tightly as Andrew knelt and opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring, no diamonds, just a small engraving inside. "You chose me. Kayla Jensen. Will you choose me like I chose you?" From the very first moment, silence. The wind stirred gently. Then Kayla nodded. Not dramatic, no applause, just two people standing amid the chaos of life choosing each other. That night, on the hotel's top floor, beneath the jazz music and a star-streaked sky, they sat side by side in silence. It wasn't just a moment of love, it was forgiveness, trust, and the quiet courage to walk toward each other. After everything, 1 year later, morning light streamed softly through the grand windows of the Jensen Whitmore, the first boutique hotel to bear both their names. On the polished brass plaque at the entrance, one line etched below made every passerby pause. Sometimes, the most beautiful things begin with a small mistake. Kayla walked the warm wooden hallway, her hair tied back, dressed simply, but with the confidence of a woman who had faced judgment and fear, and risen above it all. She was now the executive director of one of the most beloved hotels on the East Coast. In the lobby, Andrew stood speaking to a group of new staff. He was no longer the cold, distant figure he once was. Now he was composed, open, and patient. When he saw Kayla, he winked. She smiled back. No words needed. After the training session, they walked together to the small garden behind the hotel. Amid soft lavender bloom sat a long oak bench, their weekend ritual spot, where plans were made, or sometimes, where they simply sat, side by side. "Do you remember the day you spilled that first cappuccino?" Andrew asked. "I remember the smell of coffee more than the senator's face," Kayla laughed. "But I remember how you looked at me like I just burned down the entire dining room." Andrew tilted his head, pretending to think. "Well, at the time, I really thought you were a walking disaster. And now? Now, you're the best mistake I ever made." The air stilled. Kayla leaned her head against his shoulder, their fingers laced, a quiet peace blooming between them. Their story had started with a wet jacket, a cold accusation, a stain on a shirt. But in the end, it stood as proof of one truth. When people are brave enough to open their hearts, love will always find its way back. Beneath the sunlit trees, the laughter of children echoed from the back garden. And from the second-floor window, curious guests looked down at the couple on the bench. They didn't know the full story, but they could feel one thing clearly. Some love doesn't need to be explained. It just needs to be present. And so, a story born from one small mistake found its perfect ending because they changed. For each other. The end.